Tom Garrett was elbow-deep in rust when the message arrived. His hands, smeared with grease and cheap alloy paste, trembled as the courier drone hovered in front of him, blinking red. The seal on the message was unmistakable, Imperial. Not the minor guilds or bureaucratic slugs he usually dealt with. No, this bore the crest of the Vorthakai Empress herself. And she was dead. Tom barely had time to process it before a diplomatic AI voice chimed from the drone. You are hereby summoned to the Central Legal Archive, Docking Sector 17, regarding inheritance proceedings of the deceased Empress Kirovane. Then, without flourish, it zipped off. He stared after it, eyebrows furrowed, trying to recall any interaction that would warrant attention from one of the most powerful beings in the quadrant. He'd met her once years ago. A ship from her royal fleet had suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, mid-drift above a volatile mining field. Tom had been the only mechanic close enough with the right tools and guts to answer the call. He fixed the plasma conduit in record time, risking his life. She hadn't spoken to him, only stared with unreadable golden eyes before nodding once and vanishing back into her warship. Tom had chalked it up as a once-in-a-lifetime brush with galactic royalty. Apparently, the Empress had remembered it. The legal archive was a polished marble obelisk surrounded by hovering bailiffs. Inside, Tom sat alone in a stark chrome room as a tall synth notary read aloud the will of the deceased ruler. The last few lines made his stomach drop. To the human Tom Garrett, for service rendered in the silence of crisis, I bequeath my personal war beast, Vakara of the Albino line. May you find in her what none of us ever could. The notary slid over a retinal binding contract. If you decline, it said flatly, the creature will be euthanized. Per imperial law, she may not be transferred to another royal. There was no room to question it. Tom was now the legal owner of a beast bred for battle, feared even by her own people. Back at his rundown workshop, nestled between junk towers and forgotten shuttle cores, a transport pod arrived under military escort. Inside was a crate of reinforced, obsidian-hued alloy. Cold air hissed out as the hatch opened. Out stepped Vakara. She was massive, taller than him at the shoulder, fur as white as frost under starlight, marked by angular black stripes that shimmered faintly like living metal. Her eyes, pale violet, almost silver, locked onto him. Not with rage, but with disdain. She moved like royalty forced into a slum, every step oozing contempt. Her tail flicked once. She didn't growl. She didn't roar. But the silent threat in her gaze told Tom everything. Touch me and I will end you. The neighbors gathered quickly, murmuring. A few pointed, laughing. Looks like the human adopted death itself. Someone snorted. Others backed away entirely, recognizing the beast's bloodline. No one offered help. Tom gave her space, knowing better than to show dominance. He set up the only intact bay as a habitat, welding a containment fence and restoring the environmental controls to match the Empress's planet. Low light, cool air, high humidity. She refused food the first day. The second. The third. But Tom noticed, she stayed close to the crate he'd repaired. She paced around it, sniffing the edges. He realized it had once been her personal chamber, broken long ago. Without asking, he worked late into the night fixing every panel, reattaching the sonic stabilizers and temperature modulator. When it hummed to life again, Vakara stepped inside. She lay down with regal finality and, for the first time, didn't watch Tom like he was prey. She closed her eyes. He didn't say a word. Just watched her breathe. Days passed. Tom resumed work, cobbling together broken propulsion systems and busted hull plates. Vakara never interfered, but she always observed. She began to eat. Only the meat he prepped himself, only when served in a way matching the royal protocols he barely understood. Once, when Tom slipped and sliced his palm open, he cursed loudly. Vakara was there in seconds, unmoving, staring down the wound, her ears low, as if recalculating him. He spoke to her often, not expecting a reply. I know, this place is garbage. Sorry I can't give you golden cushions or a gravity spa, he'd mutter. But at least here, you can snore as loud as you want, and no one'll judge. One night, after a long shift, he found her curled just near his workspace, between piles of scrap. Not touching him, never touching, but near. Close enough. She still snarled when anyone else approached. Still tensed at the sound of shuttle sirens or military tones. But when Tom walked by, tools in hand and tired eyes half closed, she only blinked. And didn't move. He wasn't sure what he'd inherited. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a second chance, for both of them. Vakara was a storm in waiting. Even after settling into her reinforced crate, her presence was like coiled lightning, silent, but ready to strike. Tom kept a cautious distance at first, watching her through cameras rigged to the corners of the bay. She refused to be confined, often pacing for hours. The moment he approached too close, her body tensed, muscles rippling under her pale fur, eyes narrowed in silent warning. On the fourth night, she shattered the plasma fence with a calculated swipe, not with rage but indifference. Not a single scratch touched Tom, but the message was clear, boundaries were hers to decide. Tom, instead of reacting with panic, sighed and grabbed his welding gear. "Fine," he muttered. "You hate the fence. I hate broken circuits. We're even." The workshop quickly became a battlefield of patience. She dragged metal scraps into corners, shredded thermal blankets, tore apart anything that buzzed. Tom, rather than scolding, simply adapted. He moved breakables to shelves, replaced lights with dimmer alternatives, recalibrated the temperature to her likely preference based on the Empress's homeworld data. Vakara didn't show gratitude. But she stopped tearing things apart. Word spread fast. Locals called him mad. Alien engineers mocked the idea that a human could coexist with a sovereign war beast. More than once, officials stopped by, casually suggesting she be turned over to specialists. Tom always replied with the same flat tone. "She's not yours to take." One morning, he found his storage unit ripped open and a crate of rations emptied. At first, he thought Vakara had raided it. But the security logs revealed a group of scavengers had attempted a break-in overnight. The footage was brief. A shadow moved. A flash of white fur. Then silence. All the intruders were gone by the time Tom arrived. No injuries, just terror. Vakara had chased them off, clean and efficient. He found her resting by the exit door later, as if nothing had happened. No sound. No gesture. Just presence. For the first time, Tom felt something shift. She wasn't protecting territory, she had protected him. Despite her aloofness, he noticed her observing everything he did. She'd watch him weld, fix broken anti-gravs, tune fusion cores. At first, she did so from her perch. Eventually, she moved closer, sitting within arm's reach while he worked. She never interfered, but her gaze was sharp, intelligent. She seemed more aware of process than instinct alone. Tom didn't try to pet her. He didn't give commands. Instead, he included her in the rhythm of his daily grind. Spoke to her the same way he would to an old engine, with a mix of affection and irritation. "You know, most roommates at least clean up after themselves." She blinked. "Didn't think royalty made messes." Over time, her behavior changed subtly. She no longer growled when he entered her space. She let him pass near without flinching. He repaired her collar, an ancient piece of imperial tech that hadn't worked in decades. When he slid it back around her neck, she didn't resist. Didn't flinch. Just stared at him, unblinking, for a long moment before turning away. Then came the first sound. Not a growl. Not a snarl. A low, guttural chuff, deep and brief, while he was fumbling with a cluster of live wires. He turned, startled. She sat still, ears forward. It was a warning. A second later, the system overloaded. Sparks flew. He pulled his hand away just in time. She had saved him. That night, Tom stayed up repairing his burnt tools. She sat nearby, closer than ever. No movement, just presence. After hours of silence, he looked over. "You know," he said, "I think you're just pretending to hate me." She didn't react. But she didn't leave either. Later, he reviewed old Imperial logs. Vakara's previous handlers had treated her like a weapon. They used pain collars, confinement, intimidation. No wonder she loathed commands. No one had ever simply spoken to her like a person. He didn't sleep much anymore, always wary, always working. But when he dozed off in the corner one evening, head resting on a crate, he awoke to the sound of low breathing. She lay across the room, facing him, alert but still. Watching. It wasn't obedience. It wasn't submission. But something had changed. Not in her posture or tone or expression. It was subtler. She no longer watched him like prey or nuisance. She watched him like an equal. The morning started with static flickering through Tom's workbench monitors. Systems were lagging, commands delayed. At first, he assumed dust in the signal relays, but the glitches spread. One substation tripped, lights flickered, coolant pumps slowed. The shop's main generator hiccuped and then went dark for 3 seconds. That never happened. Tom jumped to reroute power, but even emergency protocols were lagging. Something was wrong deep in the wiring. He dove under the floor hatch, tracing circuits by flashlight, but found his primary power trunk had been cut, not broken, cut cleanly. He froze. This wasn't decay or wear. Someone had been inside. Someone who knew exactly where to hit. Vakara prowled the edge of the bay, unnerved. Her muscles were tight, ears up, tail twitching. She sensed it too. The shop was being watched. Tom grabbed his old plasma torch, more threat than weapon, and activated perimeter sensors. Most were dead. A few showed flickers, like shadows barely passing through their fields of vision. Then static. The intruders knew how to stay invisible. A soft metallic clatter came from the storage wing. Tom moved to investigate, but Vakara was faster. In one lunge she was gone, disappearing into the darkness. A scream followed, high, cut short, and a crash of tools. Tom found her standing over a dazed figure in a stealth suit, helmet cracked, bleeding at the temple. She hadn't killed him. She could have. Instead, she pinned him with one massive paw, letting him breathe just enough to whimper. Tom called in an anonymous tip to security. No name, no questions. By the time they arrived, Vakara had retreated to the shadows, watching silently. The attacker had no ID, but the tools in his pack matched those used by black market salvagers, people who wanted Vakara either stolen or destroyed. After they took the body away, Tom collapsed in the corner, running his hands through his hair. His shop was compromised. His systems were vulnerable. And someone had risked assassination just to unseat a mechanic with a beast he hadn't asked for. Later, while rechecking the shop's server cores, he heard a soft scrape behind him. Vakara. She stepped forward slowly, one of her front legs dragging slightly. Blood marked her fur, deep red streaking her white coat. Tom didn't hesitate. He grabbed antiseptics, stitching tools, and sat cross-legged in front of her. She growled once when he touched the gash. He didn't flinch. You saved me, he said quietly, working quickly. Took a hit doing it too. Vakara didn't growl again. She stood still, eyes half-lidded as he cleaned the wound. Her breathing stayed calm, steady. She didn't pull away. When he was done, he placed the gauze and stood back. Her gaze lingered on him a little longer than usual. Tom returned to his bench and powered up a hidden core buried beneath the wall panels. It wasn't standard issue. This one had been salvaged from a derelict Imperial transport years ago. Plugging into it triggered a cascade of dormant systems, including a voice channel. A projection flickered to life above the bench, a regal, translucent figure in violet robes. The Empress. Her voice echoed, clear despite the recording's age. If you are seeing this, then she has chosen not to devour you. That alone is a miracle. Tom stood frozen. She was bred to reject cowardice, manipulation, violence. I failed her, as did the dynasty. She waits for a leader who does not seek to lead. Treat her as a thing, and you will lose her. Treat her as sovereign, and she will show you the truth of herself. The projection ended. Tom shut the system down, mind racing. Vakara hadn't been a weapon. She'd been a mirror, made to reflect the character of whoever stood beside her. That night he didn't sleep. Instead, he worked. Rewired the damaged circuits, overhauled the sensor net, built a silent defensive grid keyed to Vakara's biosignature. He added armor shielding to her habitat, and customized her crate's environment to match the original Imperial frequencies used in her early development. She watched silently from the shadows. When he offered her clean water and fresh food, she approached without hesitation. Ate slowly. Stayed near. The next evening, while Tom calibrated a new plasma arc drive, Vakara moved behind him. Close. Quiet. And then, for the first time, she lay down beside his feet. Not between him and the door. Not near her crate. Directly at his side. She had made her choice. The invitation was delivered through a diplomatic relay, encrypted and marked urgent. Tom stared at the contents without moving. The Vorthakai court had summoned him and Vakara to the Empress's memorial rite, a mandatory appearance of all sovereign beasts in public tribute. The tone wasn't suggestive. It was a command veiled in ceremony. Noncompliance meant Vakara would be declared abandoned property, unfit to represent the imperial line. She'd be taken, dissected, or worse. Tom paced the workshop for hours, torn. She was healing, her leg barely recovered. The idea of putting her into a sea of strangers, of surrounding her with imperial eyes, made his gut twist. But there was no choice. If he refused, they'd come for her. If he submitted, he'd be risking her life, and his. He got to work. Using parts from a wrecked cargo sled and the plating from old mining suits, he built a mobile frame reinforced to shield against radiation, pressure changes, and projectile strikes. Not a cage, a platform. Something that let her walk if she chose, but carried her if needed. It was rugged, functional, and draped with carefully restored emblems from her old crate, cleaned and reattached by hand. He knew how much her past mattered. The day arrived. They moved together through the docking lanes, drawing silence from crowds and used to seeing a beast beside a man rather than leashed behind one. Vakara's fur shimmered under the station lights, her strides slow but controlled. She didn't resist. Didn't growl. Her eyes scanned every movement around them, but she didn't falter. At the plaza, alien royalty and military elites stood in clusters, every faction present. Lavish beasts draped in ceremonial medals were shown off like living trophies. Tom guided the sled to the central procession zone, heart pounding. Whispers followed them. A human? With that creature? Impossible. Offensive. Yet none dared speak aloud. A steward approached, flanked by armored guards, asking for Tom's clearance. Vakara stepped forward before he could reply, baring her fangs in silence. The guards backed off. The steward, shaken, simply nodded and stepped away. No one interrupted them again. The memorial began with the tolling of stargongs and the raising of holographic banners bearing the Empress's final seal. One by one, beasts were led forward to kneel at the monument, a massive obsidian construct glowing with ancient code. Most animals resisted, needed force, sedatives, control fields. It was expected. When it came to Vakara, Tom didn't move. He waited. Then, softly, "It's your call." She held still, gaze locked on the monument. The air tightened. Hundreds watched. Then she walked forward, not hurried, not hesitant. She approached the monument, stared at it, and then slowly lowered her body, not in fear, but in solemn acknowledgement. Her head dipped once. The silence was total. No beast had bowed without coercion in centuries. The effect was immediate. Leaders stiffened. Soldiers whispered. A royal prince took a step back. The Empress's granddaughter approached cautiously, robes trailing, and looked from Vakara to Tom. "She walks beside you," she said, tone unreadable. "She bowed for no one. Not even for my grandmother." Tom didn't reply. He didn't need to. The ceremony concluded without incident. Alien channels erupted within hours. News feeds replayed the footage again and again, the human and the Imperial predator walking side by side, equal in bearing. Analysts speculated endlessly. Was it magic? Mind control? Trickery? Others whispered a different possibility, that a new kind of alliance had been forged, not by blood or war, but by something older. Trust. By nightfall, Tom's workshop received 27 messages from royal entities requesting his services. Not as a mechanic. As an ambassador to beasts. Vakara ignored them all, curling up in the far bay, calm and watchful. That evening, Tom placed the imperial sash they'd been given in a sealed case above his workbench. He didn't wear it. He didn't care for symbols. But he understood its weight. She had walked for him. Chosen to be seen. Bowed not to a throne, but to memory. In doing so, she'd turned the galaxy's gaze. And now, nothing would be the same again. The weeks that followed moved like gravity shifted. Tom's shop, once ignored and barely functional, became a destination. Shuttles from noble families lined the docking bays, guarded by ornately dressed soldiers. Requests came hourly, repairs, diagnostics, relic restorations, but all came with the same subtext: they wanted to see the creature. Vakara wasn't just a beast anymore. She was a symbol. And Tom, by extension, became something more than a mechanic. He didn't advertise. He didn't need to. Every visit was filtered through Vakara's reactions. She'd sit by the entrance and watch, unmoving. If her gaze lingered too long or her body tensed, Tom declined the job. No one argued. Her judgment became legend. Within days, clients began including biometric honesty scores with their requests, hoping to gain favor. Tom never changed the shop's core. He still repaired broken fuses, restored junked hulls, and fixed clunky drives others refused to touch. The only real difference was that now, he had a silent partner watching over every deal. Vakara adapted to the routine like she'd been part of it forever. She no longer stalked the shadows or curled defensively. Instead, she wandered freely through the workshop, sometimes lying near open vents or perched atop stacked cargo. When she felt safe, she'd even close her eyes mid-shift. Once, when Tom fumbled a critical component and swore loudly, she chuffed quietly from her perch. It almost sounded like amusement. Her presence transformed everything. Scavengers avoided the sector. Local crime dropped. Even the station's governing board began taking Tom's calls. They offered permits, upgrades, even escorts. He turned most of it down. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to keep her safe. One afternoon, an envoy arrived bearing an obsidian data plate embossed with violet glyphs. The Empress's successor council was calling a summit, one designed to settle disputes across fractured factions. They wanted Tom to attend. Not as an engineer, but as guardian of the Imperial beast. He almost refused. It was Vakara who made the decision. When the invitation was set down, she approached it directly, sniffed once, and sat beside it. The summit hall was unlike anything Tom had seen, vaulted ceilings embedded with simulated stars, guards in genetically imprinted armor, leaders from every species seated in orbiting platforms. Tension pulsed in the air, thick and unyielding. The beast's presence turned murmurs into silence the moment she entered. A delegate from the Alrasi Confederacy raised an accusation, challenging Vakara's loyalty. They called her compromised, claimed the Empress's legacy had been tainted by letting a human possess her. Tom remained silent. He looked at her, calm and still beside him. She stood. Her body stiffened, not with aggression, but power. Her violet eyes met the delegate's without blinking. She advanced 3 steps, slow and deliberate. No sound followed, no resistance. The entire room watched, breath held. She stopped directly in front of the speaker's podium and sat, back straight, gaze unshaken. It was a verdict. The hall remained frozen for a full minute. Then the council chair declared, "The Imperial line acknowledges the human as chosen. Challenge denied." After that, no one doubted her place. Or his. Back on the station, life returned to routine, if only outwardly. Tom installed a new environmental module just for her. Custom-tuned air composition, lighting that mirrored her birthworld's twilight. He rarely left her side now, not from fear, but from understanding. She chose presence. He returned it in kind. Late one cycle, as the bay lights dimmed and the sky through the dome flickered with ion trails, he sat beside her crate with a wrench in one hand and a data pad in the other. She lay stretched out, eyes half closed. Quiet settled like a blanket. He glanced at her, voice low. You know, I used to think the hardest part of life was keeping things from falling apart. She didn't move. But maybe, he continued, it's knowing when to let them become something new. A quiet chuff. Not loud, not clear. But enough. He leaned back, watching the stars. She stayed close, unmoving. Somewhere far above, dynasties shifted, alliances recalibrated. Titles were reassigned. Old names whispered through galactic corridors now carried new meaning. But down in the warmth of plasma coils and solder smoke, a human and an albino predator shared silence, not as legend and owner, but as something stronger. Something chosen.